Okay, so a B-52 bomber could be extremely expensive, and knowing Gaijin, they're going to put a repair cost on this thing that is through the roof. Luckily, the sponsor of this video is Free Golden Eagles, which is an app I've used in the past to obtain my first premium, which was the German P-47. I cannot stress this enough, guys. This app is super easy to use, so go download it in the description down below and use my referral code to get an extra bonus 10 Golden Eagles for free. Again, thank you for our sponsor, Free Golden Eagles. Go get yourself out of agonizing debt. Welcome back to WarThunder. Now today we're going to be seeing if the B-52G should be added to WarThunder, and if it's added, how will it perform and be balanced. We're also going to be predicting when this aircraft will be added to the game. Also, make sure to go down in the comments down below and tell me which strategic bomber would you like to see added to WarThunder. Now the B-52 is one of the few aircraft that will likely outlive us. The U.S. Air Force has been using this bomber for over 60 years, which is absolutely insane. Now today we'll be specifically talking about the B-52G being added to the game because this one was used in Vietnam, and I don't think Gaijin's ready for the B-52H, which could carry smart weapons at a very high altitude. Now the B-52G could carry a lot of bombs. It has an upgraded Pratt & Whitney J75 engine, upgraded flight surfaces for better rolling. Tail gunner was relocated to the front of the aircraft while the guns still stayed on the back, and the way they aimed was via a radar scope. This was done so that the tail gunner could operate the ECM or electronic countermeasures. Another thing to note is that the B-52G, which was used in Operation Linebacker 2, which is the same operation of B-52D, shot down in MiG-21 with its tail gunner. Now this wasn't the intended role for the B-52. Luckily, it never did what it was built to do, because the B-52 was a part of the U.S. nuclear triad, which meant when things get hot, this thing would be dropping nukes over Warsaw-packed cities or strategic locations, which is pretty cool because I do think WarThunder would use this as the new nuclear bomber and tank RB, at least for NATO assets. Either way, luckily the Cold War never went hot or I wouldn't be able to do this video. With that being said, the B-52G could also drop conventional bombs. So let's see what type of bombs we could see inside WarThunder that this thing could carry, because it is a lot. Now, like I stated before, I do think this will be able to carry nuclear weapons, maybe not in your typical ARB match, but if you get enough kills in tank RB, this will likely replace the nuclear bomber. Now this thing could carry approximately 70,000 pounds worth of air-to-ground weapons, which means this could probably end a RB match in a single go. Now with that being said, this thing doesn't have good defenses. It does come with the ADR-8 chaff rockets, which would deter radar, but that's still not enough. This thing is sadly the size of Texas and is a huge radar target. And inside the age of WarThunder missiles, or Missile Thunder, the B-52 would likely be slaughtered by jets with radar-guided weapons. Even though the B-52 does have a 20mm M61 Vulcan cannon on the back, and sometimes it was fitted with 50 cal. It obviously doesn't go Mach 1 either. It goes 560 knots and has a climb rate of 6,000 feet a minute, which isn't the best, so this will likely get a high air spawn. Now during Operation Linebacker, 15 B-52s were lost, which amounted to a loss rate of less than 2%, which is pretty good. But again, this is WarThunder. If you know anything about WarThunder, you'll know the Tu-4s were shot down by hunters with 30mm. The Tu-4 had a higher chance of killing the hunter than the B-52 will have killing MiG-23s, so it's likely this thing will be shot down a lot. So how would you balance this aircraft? Well, there's a couple ways to balance this aircraft, one of them being extremely drastic and the other being pretty easy to do actually. So let's start with that one. What Gaijin could do is add bigger maps. Now currently, if you've played WarThunder recently, which I'm assuming you have, WarThunder has added big maps to WarThunder RB, which players aren't typically used to, but the matches are a lot longer and it's a lot harder to get killed immediately because the maps are so huge. You just don't get your typical dogfight furballs and, well, mosh pits. So the B-52 could bomb in peace while people are looking for other fighter jets, and maybe they'll even spot a B-52 and shoot it down, but the chances of dying are a lot lower. The second option is quite drastic. what Gaijin could do is add a system to where players could escort squad mates. So let's say you go into WarThunder, you invite your buddy into your squad, he's in a B-52 and your buddy's in an F4J. Well, what they could do is have the B-52 spawn at 30,000 feet and have your buddy spawn at 25,000 feet or 20,000 feet with the B-52. Now, the reason this is very drastic is because people could abuse this and just be like, hey, have a B-52 so I could spawn high and kill people at higher altitudes. And they would likely need another bomber for Warsaw so other players could do this. A way to balance this is to have bigger maps and have them spawn far back from the combat so that the B-52s will be way out of the way of the furball and the pilots who spawn with them won't be able to just seal club anyone off the runway. Now, this second option could work, but Gaijin is going to have to change their map designs and make bigger maps, and obviously not all the maps are big in WarThunder, such as Korea. That is a small map, and B-52 spawning on there would likely be shot down. Thing is, actually, they'd probably be able to drop their bombs before they get shot down because it's such a small map and they spawn in space basically, but still they're likely going to get shot down and die eventually. But my personal favorite is if Gaijin mixes both of these ideas. If they make bigger maps and they add a little section for bombers to spawn in behind the map, just a little further back behind the map. And this is quite possible because a lot of WarThunder's small maps are spliced from a bigger map. For example, Suez Canal has multiple maps inside of it, but Gaijin cuts it into different maps. So there is actually room outside of the borders of the map. Bombers will spawn, and if they have a squad mate escort, they'll spawn with them at like 20,000 feet and the bombers at 30,000 feet, right? And they have to escort the bombers all the way to their target and help them not die. This could be a cool, unique game mode for players to play, and it gives something new to the players. But sadly, this costs money and time, and I don't think Gaijin would waste money on something like this just because the game hasn't changed its game modes for years. Now, there is a game mode where the B-52G will actually excel, and that game mode is Sim. Gaijin doesn't have to change much for this to happen because Sim already has large maps and bombers do decently in Sim. So what you would do is basically take off and, you know, make sure you have an escort, or even if you don't, fly the obscure routes. There's a lot of routes that players don't fly in Sim, which is typically the corners of the map. People just don't go towards them. They're typically gravitated towards where all the units are, which is typically in the middle of the map or towards player bases. So if the B-52 literally just goes around the entire map, bombs bases at extremely high altitudes, it should be unscathed, especially if it has an escort. Another thing to note is that in Sim, players rarely climb to high altitude. Like, it's insane. There's never players at high altitudes. If you fly the Vegan at low altitude, you're going to find so many players. But if you hop in a Phantom, go high altitude, you look for anybody, you're likely going to lock targets towards the ground. It's insane. So B-52s could abuse this and fly at ridiculous altitudes to avoid anything that could kill them. Now, last but not least, Tank RB. Now, I don't think the B-52G specifically will do well in Tank RB. Maybe the later models with smart weapons because they could drop them at high altitude. But the G is basically going to be useless for Tank RB unless it's the nuclear bomber mode, which in that case it'll end the entire game. Now, with that being said, when will this aircraft be added to WarThunder? Well, it's kind of hard to say because this aircraft, once it's released, people won't be convulging on the ground with excitement because, well, it's a bomber and not many people play those, and Gaijin knows that. So it could be a while before we even see this aircraft, perhaps when Gaijin runs out of ideas, or maybe perhaps this year if we're lucky, because Gaijin is known to make surprise updates, and this would be an extremely cool update if they have an update called Strategic Bombers, and we get all the V bombers and the B-52 and a couple Russian bombers like the Bear. That'd be amazing. So tell me what you guys think down below in the comments. Also, like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and take care, guys.